Okay, now, as I said before, when we do completing the square, the coefficient in front of x squared has to be 1, and it's not in this case. So what do we do? Okay, what do we do? Now, we can do something very easily, okay, and this is the key thing, okay? Now, as you can see from the previous 6 questions, we are really focusing on the first 2 terms, the terms with the x. The constants, we don't really care so much. We said, oh, let's scoot it over to the right? Just kind of give some space so that we can add a number, and then at the end we need to subtract the number. So we're gonna carry out the same idea over here, okay? So we're gonna extend this idea by thinking about, all right, we're gonna factor. But we're gonna factor what? We're gonna factor out just the first 2 terms. The constant, just leave it, okay? Now that's the key part. The constant, we just leave it outside. We only factor the first 2 terms, so that you will have a number 1, which is implicit in front of the x squared. Now, and here's another thing that you have to be very careful. It's your factoring. So you have to factor out the common factor. In that case, that will be just 2. That will be simple. And a quick way to check for the validity of your work, okay, is to think about if you distribute back into the parentheses, would you get the same 2 terms? If the answer is yes, then you are good to move forward. Now, here is the little more complicated part. You have x squared plus 4x, and then there's a plus 5 outside parentheses, right? Now, like the previous slide, we're going to divide this number by 2, which is 2, and you square it. That's what you add right here, all right? 2 squared is 4. So we're going to add 4, okay? But what it's really happening here is you are not just adding 4. Now, that's the tricky part, right? You are adding, you write down plus 4, but you are not really just adding 4, because this 4, it's in the parentheses, which is about to be multiplied by 2. So you are not really adding the 4, you are adding 4 times 2. So when we do the subtraction, you've got to do the same thing. You have to do subtraction of 2 times 4, which is 8. Okay? And then we have our perfect square, which is x plus 2 squared. And then we have plus 5, and then minus 8. So our vertex form, it's going to be 2 times x plus 2 squared, and then minus 3. Okay? So that's how we get our vertex form when the a value is not 1. We simply factor, and we only factor the first 2 terms, or the x terms, because that's all we care. Okay, the constant, we still put it outside of parentheses. We do not factor anything out of the constant. It's useless. Okay, if you do that, it's just a waste of time. All right, and that's probably the most common mistake that people would do. Okay, it's right here. Do you know that you only factor out the first 2 terms? So now we're going to do some more practice, okay, just to make sure that we get a good hang of our skill. So same thing right here. We will only factor the first 2 terms, okay, and double check if it's still equivalent, okay, and the plus 25 is still outside of the parentheses. And then we will go ahead and add something, right? We're going to divide this number by 2, which is going to be 2. So plus 2 squared, which is 4. And then we have to minus what? Minus 3 times 4. Okay, 3 times 4. So our perfect square, it's x minus 2 squared, and then plus 25 minus 12. And therefore, our final product, our final vertex form, it's going to be this, okay? 3 times x minus 2 square plus 13. Okay? Very, very straightforward. All right, keep going, keep going. Number 3, okay? 5 times x squared minus 4x, okay? And then plus 13 stays out. Right, and then now I do this as 2 separate steps. You can actually go straight ahead and do this particular step, okay? Again, divide this by 2 and then add the square of that number, which would be 4. And then we have to subtract. Subtract what? 5 times 4. Okay. All right. So we are now going to write down our perfect square, which is x minus 2 squared plus 13 minus 20. So y is equal to 5 times x minus 2 squared minus 7. Okay. All right, so that's how we have the vertex form right here. So always factor the first 2 terms only. All right, now we have a little fraction right here, so be very careful. Now, and when I say be very careful, I do mean it because, like even when I was doing it at the early stage of my math journey, I also tend to make mistakes here, because when I factor out, I don't know what number to put in here. I was like, wait, hold on. What number should I put? Like, it's not 4 anymore. So what number would it be? Is it a 2 or is it an 8? Again, the way to check yourself is that if you write a number, you go ahead, multiply back in, do you get the same 2 things? As you put in 8x, then you are correct because 1/2 times 8, it's 4. Okay? So now how will things change when there's a 1/2? Well, not much at this point. Not much at this point. So divide this number by 2, which is 4. 4 squared is 16, right? So you add 16 inside the parentheses, but there's a 1/2 up front, so you have to subtract 1/2 times 16. Okay, so our perfect square, it's going to be x minus 4 squared, and then minus 5, and then minus 16 divided by 2, it's 8. So our final vertex form, it's going to be 1/2 times x minus 4 squared minus 13. Okay, so that's level 2. Okay, level 2 concerns about the situations where a is not 1. And again, we are going to factor out the first 2 terms only, and that should do it. Okay, we just do the same thing, but when we do the subtraction at the end, make sure that you also take care of the number that's being factored out sitting in front of the parentheses. Do not neglect that number. That is still playing a role in our completing the square process. Okay, again, what I want to emphasize here is that you can get the vertex form a lot easier than what we did in part 1. Part 1 was, terrible in comparison to what we just did. Part 1 is like, oh, I gotta find out the axis of symmetry, find out the y value. I mean, it works, but it's so much time, so time consuming there. All right, now, so next video would be level 3. Now, level 3, it's not going to be that kind. We're going to see some scenarios. We will see fractions. Yes, we will see fractions. So watch out, okay? So we will see level 3 in just a moment, okay? Stick around.